Across the gulf of time, there are moments that burn brighter than the stars themselves. Civilizations rise and fall, their empires built from the dust of the dead. Yet among them all, none proved so strange, so vital, or so feared as the children of the blue star. They called themselves humanity, a name small enough to fit on the tongue, and yet vast enough to echo across 1,000 worlds. Born on a planet of storms, forged beneath heavy skies and relentless trial, they rose, not in peace nor in order, but in turbulence. Where others sought safety, they hunted horizons. They were wanderers and makers, skeptics and singers, predators by necessity and poets by choice. The galaxy remembers their wars, but it is their living, their laughter, their stubborn joy that haunts quiet halls long after the banners fall. The unthinkable world. When the Concorde first found Earth, they thought the readings were wrong. A cradle world with gravity like a clenched fist, weather like a theater of knives, oceans full of teeth, continents full of venom. No one should have survived there, and yet they had. The first envoys came wrapped in sealed suits and careful caution. They expected sages, they met engineers. They expected a council, they found a workshop. Metal, heat, laughter that carried through the mask filters. "How have you stayed alive?" the envoy asked. A woman in stained overalls tilted her head. "We didn't. Not all of us. But the rest of us kept going." The Concorde had tamed risk with systems and ceremony. Humans had bargained with it, fought it, mocked it, baked it into tradition, then poured a drink and told a story about the time it almost won. To live among them was to feel a constant hum, a pressure in the air like a storm that never quite breaks. Every tool showed a scar. Every laugh was a promise to try again tomorrow. Field notes from the curious. Archivists wrote careful notes. They catalogued the human rituals that made no sense, and yet explained everything. They drank bitter liquid at dawn and called themselves alive. They scarred their skin with ink and called themselves remembered. They fought games with bone and breath and called it weekend peace. They sang when no one asked them to. They told jokes when death drew near. They turned pain into stories and, somehow, stories into fuel. One observer recorded a line that spread quietly through Concorde academies. Humans are not optimistic. They are relentless. The distinction matters. The Vraic stir. For centuries, the Vraic hegemony had ruled the dim corridors of space like a patient plague. They preferred inevitability to spectacle, subversion, debt, pressure, famine, surrender. They did not roar, they arrived. By the time you noticed, the flag was already flying. The Concorde had endured them the way stones endure tides. Talk, treaty, temporary mercy. Then humanity said a word the galaxy had not heard in a long time. No. The first clashes were brief and ugly. Human vessels were inelegant, improvised, irritable machines. They bled heat like wounded animals. Their captains flew them like stolen knives. Patterns failed. Predictions wandered. The Vrak discovered a new hazard, choice under fire. Humans made it faster. On Yitris Phi, 200 Marines held a line for 6 days against 10,000. Not because the numbers made sense, but because retreat did not. Relief ships broke through the ash haze to find smoke, silence, and living soldiers who could barely stand, grinning like sinners at the gate. From that field, a rumor grew into a name: the Wolves of the Blue Star. Echo Squad. In the dark of the Long War, a small unit earned a quiet notoriety: Task Force Echo. 4 silhouettes against the nebulae. Roza Cortez, Commander, Earthborn, eyes like tempered iron. Varuk of the Grail, a wall with a heartbeat, scarred and steady. Selithar of the Zelic, the whisper in the circuit, the knife hidden in the code. Kessar of the Veilkin, scout and witness, cautious feet, faithful heart. They did not match. They did not need to. What bound them was not blood but direction, toward danger, toward each other. Legend says they once breached a Vraic enclave with a broken map, a borrowed shuttle, and a plan Roza described as polite chaos. It succeeded because they decided it would. Sometimes that was the whole difference. The lesson of gravity. Most worlds in the Concord floated gentle. Half-grav skies, slow rivers of air, bones that bent but rarely broke, bodies molded for stillness. Earth was an argument against all of that. Bones like struts, muscle woven dense as rope, hearts that didn't quit when lungs begged for mercy. Humans were not irresistible because they were strongest. They were terrifying because they were built for cost. They paid it up front, then kept paying, step after step, breath after breath, long after the invoice should have been stamped paid in full. Kessar tried to keep pace once. He wheezed, cursed gently in Veilkin obscurities, and finally asked Roza, "How do you endure this?" She grinned through sweat. We trained in a place that never cared how we felt. Then she slowed, just enough, and let him match her stride. A brief anthology of courage. A border moon, pockmarked by old mines. A diplomat buried in a maze of steel. An alarm that refused to stay silent. Selithar spoke to walls until they opened. Varuk took a hallway built for machines and made it a memory with his shoulders. Kessar became a rumor at the edge of a light cone. Roza argued with a gun until it agreed. They left with the diplomat and more questions than answers. They did not explain how. Some truths sharpen if you file them on silence. A siege that was supposed to last a month. It ended in a week because the wolves arrived with a cargo hold full of food, a transmitter full of music, and the kind of stubborn cheer that breaks arithmetic. The defenders stopped counting days and started counting jokes, and then the gates opened from the inside. A convoy ambushed in the corridors between stars. Echo lost an engine and a wing. Roza said, "We've flown worse." Kesar checked the log. No, they had not. They landed anyway. They repaired with wire, will and curses that Selithar helpfully translated into syntax the ship could understand. Sometimes survival is about fluency in the languages of broken things. Shore leave. War ends poorly. Peace begins privately. On Earth, the wolves learned to sit still. It took effort. They found an old bar with wood scarred soft by time. They discovered that Varuk could sing low and true if the song was about fire or home. They learned Selithar preferred silence, but would accept a second glass of something golden if the sunset was kind. Kesar stared at a lake so calm it felt like a held breath. "This is unsettling," he admitted. Roza tossed him a stone. "Then break it." He did. The rings moved outward, patient and inevitable. Later, Kesar wrote to his kin, "They are not gentle, but they are kind. There is a difference." An inventory of ordinary miracles. A barbecue where the cook burns his thumb and laughs anyway. A card game where no one cheats because the stakes are not about winning. Boots by a door, drying in a row after rain. Music that doesn't need words to mean stay. A scar traced with ink. A toast to the ones not present. A promise made without ceremony, kept without witness. These are not grand things. They are how the great things stayed alive. The short flame. Time is a patient hunter. It followed humanity at a respectful distance, then caught up as it always does. The Grail counted decades in long strides. The Veilkin measured centuries like seasons. Humans measured years like sparks. Kesar learned the choreography of loss. How to stand straight at a hospital door. How to listen when hands could no longer do the work. How to carry laughter like a relic from a bright temple. Roza's hair silvered. Her voice softened at the edges, never at the core. One evening she said, "It hurts less if you keep moving." He said, "You taught me to sit." She smiled. Both things can be true. When her last day came, the room was full, but not crowded. A window opened to a warm wind, the smell of rain coming, footsteps in the hallway that no one minded. She looked at the lake, or perhaps through it, and smiled like someone who had made a fair trade. The stars did not dim, but the people looking up at them did for a while. What remains? Kesar told his children what mattered. Not the sizes of battles, not the names carved into memorial stone. He told them that bravery is a verb, that tenderness is a tactic, that you can be afraid and still go. Were they gods? The smallest asked. No, he said, and his voice did not waver. They were neighbors who refused to leave. He taught them to run under heavy skies without resenting the weight. He taught them to mend before they built new. He taught them a human word that lacks a neat translation in most tongues. Anyway, we have every reason to stop. We go anyway. Postscript from the archivist. In the centuries that followed, historians wrote sober pages about tonnage and tonality, tonnage again, and treaties signed at tables no one visits anymore. They argued about doctrine. They footnoted logistics. They forgot to mention that a song cut through a bombardment and changed the day. On quiet nights in the archive, there is a drawer with no label. Inside are photographs, boots, a bent dog tag, half a playing card, a napkin with coordinates and a bad sketch of a cat. No provenance, immense gravity. Perhaps history is not the sum of iron and ink. Perhaps it is the weight of the small things that refuse to vanish. The flame you can't see. The humans are gone now, at least the ones who spoke in the air we know. Their cities have softened, their machines have turned to mystery and then to dirt. And yet their warmth persists like heat in old stone after sunset. It lives in the way soldiers share water, in the way pilots touch the console twice for luck, in the way strangers move closer when someone begins to sing. When the night grows long and courage feels like a story you heard once and misplaced, a whisper still travels through the ranks on worlds that never met Earth at all. The wolves are watching. The universe forgets names. It remembers gestures. It remembers the stubborn hand that lifted another from the ground and said, "Up." In the hush between stars, something runs. Not a creature, not a fleet, a promise. And though no instrument can measure it and no chart can plot it, the path it makes is clear enough to follow. Coda. If you should ever pass a lake at dusk and feel the air pressed down like a friendly hand, sit. If you should ever find a road that looks too long for your breath, walk. If you should ever hear laughter where grief should be and think it a mistake, listen again. This was the human trick to stand inside the hurt and make a home. To take the worst sky anyone had seen and call it morning. To burn brief and leave warmth. In the silence that follows, if you strain past engines and weather and the static of your own worry, you may hear it, faint as memory, sure as tide. The wolves still run,